This man created the most terrible weapon on Earth, which was supposed to prevent future wars, but due to the fault of politicians, it caused the death of hundreds of thousands of people. Now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. With the help of the atomic bomb, physicist Robert Oppenheimer wanted to protect the United States from a military threat, but instead the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed. The invention changed the life of Oppenheimer himself. Having unleashed an arms race between the states and the USSR, in all subsequent years he advocated control over nuclear reserves, and the government, which declared the scientist an American Prometheus and a national hero, threw him off Olympus. The scientist was suspected of espionage for the Soviet Union and an anti-government position. But how did Oppenheimer become the father of the atomic bomb? And why did his creation ultimately make its creator the target of political persecution? Now we will tell the story of a man whose legacy keeps the whole world in suspense. Strange genius. Robert Oppenheimer was born in New York on April 22, 1904. His parents were wealthy Jewish emigrants from Germany. They were able to give their son an excellent education. The boy himself was also no slouch. He grasped any information on the fly and even completed 3rd and 9th grades as an external student. After school, Robert studied at Harvard to become a chemist. But it was there that he realized that he liked physics much more. After graduating from university, he went to British Cambridge to master a new specialty. It was there that it turned out that Oppenheimer had a talent for theoretical physics. But as a practitioner he is completely clumsy. Failures in experiments hit his pride so much that one day, in the heat of an argument with a friend, about laboratory work, Robert almost beat up his friend. Subsequently, those around him spoke more than once about Oppenheimer's not entirely stable psyche. As a result, after just 2 semesters he left London for Göttingen, Germany, where at that time one of the leading centers of theoretical physics in the world was located. In Germany, Robert truly blossomed as a specialist. Returning to America at the age of 24, he immediately became one with professors at the University of California at Berkeley. The young scientist's charisma, deep understanding of the subject and oratorical talent attracted students to him. Over the next 14 years, the town of Berkeley became the center of theoretical physics in the United States. In 1936, Robert began dating communist Jim Petlick. At that time he was passionate about left-wing political trends. And many people from his circle later joined the Communist Party. It even included Oppenheimer's brother Frank, some of his friends and his future wife Catherine Poeng. Already in the 50s, during the witch hunt, Oppenheimer's past connections would undergo a thorough revision. Manhattan Project. In 1938, German physicists split the nucleus of an atom for the first time, and recorded the release of a large amount of energy. Having learned about these experiments, Albert Einstein sent a letter to U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt, in which scientists Leo Szilard, Eugene Wigner, and Edward Teller expressed their concerns regarding the possible creation by the Nazis of a new deadly weapon, atomic bombs. The American government almost immediately launched its own atomic research. After the Japanese attack on the American military base at Pearl Harbor, the United States entered World War II. And they expanded atomic research into a large-scale program, codenamed the Manhattan Project. To launch, it was necessary to appoint a scientific supervisor. The military leader of the project, Leslie Groves, nominated Oppenheimer for this role. But his candidacy immediately raised objections in the government. The intelligence services already knew about his connections with the communists and excessive ambitions. However, the general insisted on Oppenheimer's approval. And as time has shown, it was not in vain. The physicist set to work with enthusiasm. In 1943, under his leadership, construction began on a secret laboratory in the isolated town of Los Alamos. Already in 1944, about 3,000 of the best physicists worked here. That same year, Nazi Germany began to retreat under the pressure of Soviet troops. But Allied Japan was determined to fight the United States to the last. However, in Washington, the answer to this stubbornness was almost ready. Bomb test. On July 16, 1945, in the desert of Jornada del Muerto, which in Spanish means the path of the dead man, everything was ready to test the latest weapons. Oppenheimer slept only about 4 hours that night. His colleague Edward Taylor assumed something terrible. As if a chain reaction of a bomb could spread to the Earth's atmosphere, because of which it will completely burn. By the time of the test itself, Oppenheimer was on the verge of nervous exhaustion, and could hardly stand on his feet. But all fears were in vain. Some laughed, some cried. The majority were silent. I remembered a line from a Hindu scripture. Now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. On May 9, 1945, Germany surrendered. And already on July 26, members of the anti-Hitler coalition, the leaders of Great Britain, the USA, and the USSR invited Japan to sign surrender. But Emperor Hirohito and other members of the government rejected the plan. Not knowing that the United States had already placed components of a weapon previously unprecedented in destructive power, close to the coast of the land of the rising sun. On August 6 and 9, the United States detonated 2 atomic bombs over the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As a result of the explosions, according to various sources, from 110 to 210,000 people died. The use of the atomic bomb and the terrible consequences of the explosions deeply shocked rulers, citizens, and scientists around the world. The father of the atomic bomb, Robert Oppenheimer, had ambivalent feelings. Yes, his invention worked, but it killed too many civilians. Together with his colleagues on the project, he wrote a letter to the U.S. Secretary of War. We believe that the security of a nation cannot depend on its scientific and technological achievements. It can only be based on making future warriors impossible. We unanimously and strongly recommend that you take all steps and all necessary international agreements to achieve this goal. For Americans, the father of the atomic bomb became an undisputed national hero. In 1946 he was awarded a Medal of Merit, and a year later he was appointed head of the General Advisory Committee, the Atomic Energy Commission, and the Director of Advanced Research at the Princeton Institute. Oppenheimer was involved in overseeing all atomic research and development in America. Deadly race. Soon America was seriously afraid of the Red Menace. Just 4 years after the first U.S. atomic bomb test, Moscow successfully tested its own. The Allied relations of the Second World War were left behind. This was the beginning of the Cold War and the nuclear race between the two superpowers. Back in the early 40s, Oppenheimer's colleague Edward Teller dreamed of creating a hydrogen bomb, which, according to his calculations, could be tens of times more powerful than an atomic one. Although at that time its development was considered unprofitable, the government now seized the chance to once again provide the state with military priority. The draft design of the doomsday weapon was ready already in 1951. As chairman of the General Advisory Committee of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, Oppenheimer opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb and lobbied for international arms control. He was concerned that Taylor's strategic weapons could again be used against civilians. This position was at odds with the interests of the government. With his protest, Oppenheimer made political enemies. Window gamer cancelled. In November 1953, FBI Director John Edgar Hoover received a letter from a confidant of the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, Lewis Strauss. It said that Oppenheimer could be an agent of the Soviet Union and deliberately slow down the progress of the program. The following month, Robert was informed that his security clearance had been revoked and he was asked to resign. However, the scientist, who had never controlled all nuclear developments in the States, insisted on holding hearings. On April 12, 1954, the trial began. Oppenheimer faced 24 charges, 23 of which were related to collaboration with the Communists. The scientists' objection to the development of a hydrogen bomb was also taken into account. Edward Teller, who advocated the creation of nuclear weapons and building up America's military potential, testified against the former leader. I completely disagreed with him on many issues, and his actions seemed confused and complicated to me. I personally would feel more secure if the public interest were in military hands. Despite the fact that Oppenheimer was under close surveillance in the early 40s by the intelligence services, who read his mail and even installed bugs in his house, no evidence of the transfer of American data to Moscow was ever revealed. In the end, he agreed with 20 of the 24 charges, but added that he had never actually been a member of any left-wing party. As an unreliable person, Oppenheimer was stripped of his security clearance. When governments make bad decisions in the field you work in, and those decisions appear cowardly, vindictive, short-sighted, or mean-spirited, you become disheartened. The results of the hearing shocked other reputable experts. They supported Oppenheimer, and spoke out sharply against Teller. The latter was hardly bothered by the attacks. From then on, nothing stopped him from leading the program to create a hydrogen bomb. Over the following years, he successfully carried out 27 different tests. Oppenheimer himself spent the next 13 years lecturing around the world and remained director of the Princeton Institute for Advanced Study. Shortly before his death, the 35th President of the United States, John Kennedy, tried to correct the injustice towards the physicist and awarded him the prestigious Henrik Fermi Prize, as a sign of political rehabilitation. However, the scientist was never again cleared for classified information, and as a consequence to large government programs. On February 18, 1967, Robert Oppenheimer died of throat cancer. In 2009, American and Russian historians jointly analyzed materials from the KGB archive and found that although the Soviet intelligence services did make attempts to recruit the scientist, they failed to do so. It was only in 2022 that Oppenheimer was finally rehabilitated in the United States. They began to listen to the ideas of the outstanding scientist on nuclear deterrence quite late, without fully hearing them. In the first 30 years since the creation of the atomic bomb, more than 1,000 atmospheric, underwater, and underground nuclear tests were carried out around the world. In October 1961, the USSR demonstrated the most powerful nuclear Tsar bomb in history. The unprecedented charge only spurred the nuclear race. In 1962 alone, the USA carried out 96 tests, and the USSR 79 tests. In 1987, Secretary General Mikhail Gorbachev and the 40th U.S. President Ronald Reagan entered into an agreement under which the countries had to eliminate most of the nuclear warheads. While the USSR and the USA tried to maintain a balance, nuclear weapons appeared in India, Pakistan, China, and other countries. In 2007, Russia and the United States proposed to give the treaty a global character, but the world did not support the idea. Since 2014, the two sides have accused each other of violating the principles of the treaty, and eventually, by 2019, the document ceased to be in effect. As of January 2023, out of 12,500 global stockpiles of nuclear warheads, about 2,000 were on high alert. Almost all of them belonged to Russia and the USA. Did the creator of the atomic bomb then in the 40s imagine what the development of his brainchild would lead to? No one can predict what kind of knowledge the science of the future will discover in the field. In your opinion, was Oppenheimer a monster who, in order to satisfy his own ambitions, created a deadly weapon of monstrous power, or a genius who failed to hold back the onslaught of politicians and the military? He could have prevented the states from using bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Write your opinions in the comments.